All right, guys, welcome back to another episode of The Deep End, episode 21. We are really rocking and rolling with this thing. Real quick, guys, The Deep End, this episode of The Deep End and the entire show is brought to you by Blossom. And if you guys want to see our full portfolios and join an awesome community of investors, definitely check out Blossom. There's a link to it in the description of the video and in the pinned comment or in the show notes as well, depending on where you're watching or listening. But, one way or another, definitely check out Blossom. But Ari, man, how you doing today? What's going on in your world?
I am doing. The market seems to be doing well. You know, it looks like everything is due to a lot of the trade talks going in I think a much better direction than we were a couple weeks back, last week, and just a lot of momentum, I think, with these trade talks. And so that's what we're seeing reflected in the market, and therefore my portfolio, at least as of today, is just above 265,000.
Dang.
I've been creating some, I think you've seen some of them, I think, fire Blossom posts, just talking about one of my goals by the end of the year, which we already spoke about episodes back. And that goal is surpassing 300,000 within my brokerage account. So, Ryan, I'm just hyper focused on that goal and surpassing that goal. And, I've even created a pretty bold, I want to say, statement there, put that out there in Blossom. And I said, next year is going to be my $1 million year, not just based off of investing. That would be crazy.
That'd be crazy.
Based off of, some of my career moves, investing, everything coupled together. And I'm really excited, Ron. I got to be honest with you. I'm fired up about the future. I'm happy about where the market is right now and where it's going. But with all that said, man, how are you feeling? What's going on in your end with your portfolio?
Man, more or less the same. I think I'm back up to all-time highs in the portfolio. We're just like inching closer and closer to that elusive $100,000 mark. But you know how it goes. Last week was pretty good. This week so far, for the most part, has been pretty good. It's Wednesday as we're recording this. Yesterday, Tuesday, was an insane day on the stock market, and I think that pushed my portfolio up to all-time highs. But like I was saying, you know how it goes. You've got those good days, and then I'm probably going to jinx myself, so I'll knock on wood. The rest of the week is going to be red, and then I'll be back down to like 93, 94. So we'll see what happens. But things are good, man, and we're still chugging along one way or another. There is one thing that I've been thinking about in my portfolio, and just a move that I'm thinking about making. And I actually think if you're cool with it, it would be really helpful to bounce this idea off you, and also all of you guys watching and listening. And you'll have to let me know what you think. And it might be a little bit of a rant, so I apologize in advance.
I am all for it. I've been excited to hear about this since we popped on. And actually, just so everyone knows, I think Ryan and I did our best this time to jump right into the conversation. But one of the first things Ryan said was he's got something to say and he's itching to say it. And now I'm very curious, and I have two thoughts going on in my head. Either you're about to add a growth stock to your portfolio, or you're ditching Clear Secure. Or it could be nothing. But hit us with this information.
I'm actually thinking I might, and this is going to be crazy, but I think I might go all in on TSLY.
No.
Yeah.
No.
No, all jokes aside, I'm kind of chewing on the idea.
You're an affiliate for TSLY.
Yeah, there you go. Got the Yield Max tattoo and everything. No, man, I'm kind of thinking about maybe selling out of Altria Group, which is a stock that I've owned for, I've owned Altria Group pretty much ever since I got into investing. I think Altria was one of the first positions that I bought. And I don't know. I'm just, like I said, I'm just chewing on it. I don't know if I'll actually do it, but here's what I'm thinking. And bear with me as I explain this, because I might be all over the place.
Can I throw but just before you begin, can I throw a question in?
Yeah, absolutely.
What even prompted the thought to get rid of it? Because I feel like that's not such a Ryne move to get rid of an Altria Group type of play. And now I'm curious, did any of our deep end chats chime in with growth, or like did you feel a certain way, see a type of investment move you wanted to make? Like why all of a sudden?
Yeah, that's a good question. I truthfully don't know what sparked this thought. I probably started thinking about it yesterday or Monday. But I will say that I've had this thought time and again when it comes to Altria. And like so anyway, it pops into my head. I'll kind of change my mind and decide, nah, I'll hold on to it. So I've kind of gone back and forth on it for some time, but it's once again popped into my head. And I would say that this time I've thought a little bit harder about it than I have in the past. And here are some things that I'm thinking, and maybe some reasons why I'm maybe leaning more towards actually doing it this time than other times I've thought about it. So first and foremost, like one of the good things about Altria, this could be a good thing or a bad thing, good for investors, bad for consumers, is Altria creates and they sell a very addictive product, obviously, tobacco and nicotine and whatnot. Now, with that said, and some of this is going to be obvious to you guys, but with that said, the product where they derive most of their revenue is from combustibles. It's from cigarettes, Marlboro, which has just a huge share of the overall cigarette market. So that's working in their favor. But as we all know, cigarette volumes are declining over time, and once again, this is obvious. This is something I've known for a long time, and that's not really necessarily why I'm thinking about selling it. That's part of it, but beyond that, I just think that, just generally speaking, so much has to go right for this business, for it to continue to be a good, resilient, long-term investment. And for the most part, since it's been around, I mean, the company's been around for a long, long time. Ever since it was founded, it's been a very resilient business. It's grown its dividend actually for twice as long as I've been alive, basically. And so it's been just a remarkable dividend payer and grower. It's a very high yielding company. And, it's been a really solid investment. So it's got that working in its favor. It's been good. But like I said, I think a lot has to go right moving forward for this one to continue to be as resilient as it has been in the past. Now, a few of those things. Number one, their transition to a smoke-free future, which is going from combustibles to, basically vapes and the nicotine pouches and whatnot, whatever all of that smoke-free stuff encompasses. I mean, that's not been an easy process for them. It seems like in making that transition, and this is still continuing to play out, and maybe that's why I'm revisiting it more, is because it's had more time to play out. But as they've worked on making this transition, it just seems like they can't get anything right. It seems like they run into roadblocks every single time. They made a big investment in Juul, which is a very popular product, but they ended up having to write down something like 90% of the value of that investment. It turned out to be a huge loser for them. They're not affiliated with Juul anymore, and instead they put all their eggs in the Enjoy basket, which, from my understanding, is a pretty similar product. But now, with Enjoy, they can't even sell it because of patent infringements with Juul. And so now they're running into a roadblock there. And the one thing that does seem to be going right for them right now is their On pouches, their nicotine pouches, which that product, whether it's On or Zyn or any other brand, those are very trendy right now. Those are very in trend. And so that product in that product category is seeing some really strong tailwinds, which is another thing that's working for the company's favor. And the revenue from that is growing at a pretty aggressive clip, like definitely double-digit CAGRs, on an annual basis. But still, it's such a small percentage of their revenue that it's still going to take a long time, even with these growth rates. It's still going to take a long time for the revenue from the smoke-free arena to catch up to their combustibles. And so, it's the sales are kind of doing this, where the sales are derived from are kind of doing this. But it just seems like it's going to take a long time for them to, I guess, be even, and for that transition to really go into effect. And along the way, at least so far from what I'm seeing, nothing that they're doing, with the exception of On, nothing that they're doing in taking steps towards this is really working out for them. And meanwhile, while all that's going on, you have all these illicit products, these illicit vape products coming into the market from China, from other countries, that are taking market share and taking sales away from the US based regulated companies like Altria Group. And so Altria, heavily regulated industry, which could be a good thing and a bad thing, they have to play by this set of rules, but these illicit products that keep coming in are not having to play by those same rules. And management has talked about this for the last like couple of years in the quarterly earnings calls. They talk about every single time. Their opinion is that the government isn't doing anything to police these illicit products. They're not really doing anything to help the situation. And this has been the case for years, and it doesn't seem like that situation's getting any better. And so putting all of these things in a pot and blending them all together just is really driving me to the conclusion that, like I said, just so many things have to go right for this thing to be a good investment. Now, in the meantime, I'll still be able to get a dividend. I think that dividend will still grow because if we look at the financials, the earnings per share is still growing. The free cash flow is still growing. So, those are good things. But, beyond the numbers, I'm just kind of losing faith in the business as a whole. Beyond the numbers, some of the numbers still look fine. And I think now might be a good time to get out because it's seen like a 42% run up in the last year. I think my position, including dividends, is up 73%. So I think may not be a bad time to just take the money and run and reinvest it elsewhere. And especially as I look around at some of the other companies in my portfolio, I think there's companies where less has to go right for them to continue to be good investments. Does all of that make sense? I know that was a rant, so I'm sorry.
No, 100%. I mean, if you're about to dump it all into Clear Secure, I think we have a winner.
Yeah, no.
But look,
I'm holding that one.
I like, what you had shared. First of all, you shared something that I think was important, which was that you think it's going to take a long time for this company to kind of get it right, so to speak. And, I want to say that's a layer that is almost atypical of something that you would say. And I don't even think that's a real reason why, you're thinking about forgoing Altria Group. I actually think it all comes down to your actual faith in the company because you're the type of buy and hold investor who does exactly that, buys, holds. And to your point, it's never a bad idea to cash out when you're on that winning streak. And if any time that you're going to pull this trigger on a sell, well, it better be now. As you shared, you're up over 70% on it, and Altria is up over 40% on the year. And it just sounds like the opportunity is now to do exactly what you're looking to do. My question is, where are you going to put that capital and how quickly are you going to allocate it? Because I feel like, something that would definitely prompt me. I mean, I've made these moves. Everybody has watched me, cut my portfolio down to what it is today and, invest pretty heavily in dividend growth stocks based on my profile. Would you think about going more growth, or you think you're going to go more towards the conservative, higher yielding dividend stock to kind of match what Altria was dishing out?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I probably a combination of the two. Like I think I would take some of that money and I would use that to build up my Zoetis position a bit more because I'm still dollar cost averaging into that. So maybe beef up Zoetis a little more. I think I'd like to put some of that money into Chevron. I think now's a pretty decent time to buy Chevron. I may put a little bit of that into like a Main Street not Main Street because that one's a bit rich right now. Maybe like a Blue Owl Capital Corporation, which does have a high yield. But I think that's a great business development company, and also like an example of an example of a company where not as much has to go right for the business to continue driving returns. So maybe Blue Owl, Zoetis, Chevron. I would say those are like in my mind the three places that I'd maybe want to put it. Maybe a little Johnson and Johnson too, but I would spread it out across my portfolio with the goal to put it into other companies that I want to build larger positions in, while at the same time not taking too many steps backwards in terms of my annual dividend income. Now, if I lose out on some annual dividend income from this move, then so be it. It's not like a huge deal. I've got plenty of time to recoup that, so I'm not really worried about it. But I do look around at the rest of my portfolio and see some areas where I can invest in like equally resilient businesses that don't have to face as much of an uphill battle, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I like what you shared actually originally. You said not a lot has to go right in order for you to kind of get that ROI back. Those are the exact type of companies that I personally love investing into. And, a couple weeks ago, we were talking about how I swung in and out of, well, I was invested in Visa, I sold it, and then I swung back in, and then I sold it again. And it's currently not in my portfolio. But you know what it is? What I did add? Waste management. And that's a
Okay.
company that, again, it's like not a lot has to go right, for me to get
Yeah.
that ROI. And I'm already seeing it when it fell, a week ago, I believe it was, and it jumped right back up. Trash collection's not going anywhere. There's really only one other competitor in this arena with waste management. And I kind of think it's a similar type of play you'd be looking to get into, not necessarily waste management, but it's just like a company where if just one or two things continues to go right, we're going to be booming in terms of returns. And I also
Yeah.
think, Ryan, it will probably be like less stressful for you. At least it's been for me the case where when I cut back on, not cut back or, when I cleaned up my portfolio and started doubling down on the highest of conviction stocks, I found it to be more alleviating. I don't have to keep up with as many companies. That was a massive plus. And, the returns I was seeing for the companies that I was invested into with high conviction, I mean, now I feel more and more like an investor into these companies. Not that if you have like 5 shares or 10 shares, you're not a shareholder and therefore you're not really invested into it. But when you have more skin in the game and higher conviction plays in your portfolio, I mean, I feel like an investor today in the stocks that I'm invested into because there's only a handful of them, and that means that there's more capital in each of them. So therefore, when we jumped on and I'm talking about the big loser in my portfolio, United Health right now. Yeah, I'm feeling the pains of United Health. And I laughed last video because I read through all the comments and people were like, don't worry, United Health's going to be all right. I'm not worried about United Health. It's the big loser right now. So when a stock is down, it's down, you feel it. But again, they just pull a couple of, I don't want to say, I was going to say a couple of triggers. I won't say that. They just make
Yeah.
a certain couple of moves, and I think they're going to be back in business. I think they have some PR maintenance to do. Definitely a lot of PR maintenance to do and some cleanup. But overall, over the long term, 2 or 3, I think moves, critical business moves, and we're back in business. I think you're making the right move.
Thanks, man. And there's two sides to it, obviously. Like as kind of spilling my guts on this whole thing, I'm also thinking about the but it's buying back a ton of shares. Yeah, but Altria Group is just printing free cash flow. This company is so it's just flowing cash that's not even funny. And so there's a handful of buts that make me kind of rethink everything that I just said. But ultimately I think I have to focus on the risks that I see with it. And in my mind, like the risks are starting to, as the story is playing out more. I didn't used to think this way, and I think that's why I so easily discarded these thoughts about Altria. But as the story continues to get played out, I'm just not seeing the situation improving. I'm seeing it worsen, and I think that's ultimately what I have to focus on. And I guess the good thing for them is that like they still have optionality because they are so cash heavy and they're printing so much cash. They have the optionality to try other things, to buy other companies, and to try other things as it pertains to this smoke-free future. So it still could play out, and it still could be good for them. But I just don't know. Like the examples where that they've tried, it just doesn't seem like it's been good. So maybe we move on to bigger and better things. Anyway,
Well, let me give you a yeah, but for
yeah,
all the yeah, buts that you've had.
please do.
When you catch the bug, the I might have to sell this bug, or I don't know, should I sell it? You caught the bug. And I think anytime you catch that sell bug, it just eats away at you until you actually sell it, because there's just this little nagging voice in your head. And that's been happening to me over the whole past year, since I wanted to pivot and change directions with my strategy. And it was like that morning when I texted you from the dog park, Ryan, I think I'm going to sell Johnson and Johnson. And I was like, I'm not going to do it right now. I'm going to, because it's, I'm very calculated when I buy or when I sell. But I was sitting on that for days before I even messaged you about it. And then I was sitting on it for days after. And eventually those voices got so loud for me. It was just like, why are you invested in J&J? Yes, it's a great company, an amazing, amazing dividend paying stock. No doubt about it. But this is what your strategy is, and this is where you want to go. So what are you doing over here? And that voice, it was way too loud. And over the course of days, it got louder and louder. And I just think that's where you have been sitting, and that's where you're currently sitting, where it's like that volume is just going to get turned up, and it's going to be like, sell, sell, and eventually you're just going to get rid of it, whether it's today or a couple days from now. I feel like for sure by next chat, you're going to have it kicked from the portfolio.
Yeah, well, you may be right, man. I think this conversation so far has been very validating. And thank you for the feedback there. I also, with that said, once again, I want to hear what you guys have to say in the comments. Let me know your thoughts on this too, because I just want to get as many different eyes on this as I can, just to not to validate anymore, but just to see if I could be missing something. Like, and if you have the other side of this argument, give it to me, please, because it would be very helpful. But I think that's what makes investing so, conversations like this and thinking about all this stuff is what makes investing so fun to me. Like, I have fun thinking about this stuff and you know toiling over these decisions. A lot of people would look at this and think, why would you deal with that? Just buy VU, just buy SCHD and call it a day. Who cares? But I'm like, no, this is why I do it, because I like thinking about this and spending time with it and thinking about the place of these businesses in the world. And yeah.
I want to add, I know someone who's an executive at Philip Morris, and they are also battling some of these, industry woes, if you will. And the industry's changing. People are changing, and it's interesting when we call it a smoke-free future. But whether it's the vapes or the pouches or just nicotine, whatever it is, I think that it's just been an interesting. And I've had conversations with this guy, this executive from Philip Morris, and they've seen some real pains and shifts, and they're trying hard, even with regulations and working with the government, like trying to move the needle here, because the reality is, with these big warning labels now, and just the industry was forced to change. And for me, I could never. Yeah, I've spoken about Altria Group and Philip Morris, of course, on the channel, because they're great dividend paying stocks, and the product as is addictive. I just could never get myself to invest into the company, and I can never envision myself running those companies. When I was leaving Tip Ranks, I was talking to this executive, and there might have been opportunity for me to just jump over to Philip Morris, and I just didn't want to. There was nothing that I was like, nah, it's not good. And then we always get people, when you talk about like a quote unquote sin stock, that are like, yeah, but you invest in this other stock. And I'm like, I know every stock has, even Coca-Cola, right? How many Coca-Colas can you drink? Unless you're Warren Buffett, I feel like,
Yeah.
he's saved by Coca-Cola. But I feel like anybody else, there's so many unhealthy products and just unhealthy things in the market. There's something about Philip Morris and Altria Group that I'm like, no, I can't, because I just feel like, I don't know, to smoke is, I probably see a lot of comments now coming our way when I say this, but it's ignorant to smoke. Can I just say that, like, outright? Like, we know that causes cancer. It's kind of the way I think about it. And, we're always talking about the gym, but like, I treat my body like a temple, man. Work out, eat healthy, and don't put things into my body that I know are actively going to work against me. So why would I want to work for the company or hold the stock? It's kind of how I think about it.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I think a lot of people think that same way. There's definitely a moral and ethical argument to be made for not investing in those companies. I can't say, maybe this isn't the best thing to admit, but I can't say that that's like a huge driver of my reasoning for wanting to sell. But to your point, like, this is, as you were saying that, I'm comparing it to something like alcohol, right? And people have issues with alcohol for sure. That's an addictive product too. But there's a lot of people out there like myself who, like, I enjoy a beer every once in a while and it's no big deal. Like, that's not good for me. It's not the best thing for your liver. It's also not good for like fat loss if you're trying to be in as good of shape as possible. But I think a beer every once in a while is not going to kill you, or a margarita or cut water or whatever you like to consume. You can do that. You can do that in moderation, but it doesn't seem like that's as common when it comes to tobacco and nicotine. Like, if someone's smoking cigarettes, they're not typically just doing it every once in a while. It's much more addictive. It's one of those things where it's easier to do it once and then it becomes the habit. And I've seen this play out so far with the nicotine pouches. Like, I have friends who prior to the nicotine pouches becoming so popular were not didn't smoke, didn't use tobacco, didn't chew tobacco, didn't do anything in this realm. But then they were randomly offered this innocent seeming pouch with this like fruity flavor or whatever it is. They do one, and it doesn't seem like it's that big of a deal, and then next thing they've developed a new habit. And I've been offered like that stuff too, and it seems fine. Like, I don't think it doesn't seem nearly as bad or deadly as like actual chewing tobacco or smoking cigarettes. But still, I look at that and think, yeah, that's just not another habit that I need to pick up. I'm sure it's, nicotine. A lot of people are coming out now and saying it has definitely some health benefits, but still, be that as it may, it's not a habit that I need to add to my plate. So,
Well, look, to your point about alcohol, and even if I don't know, a Coca-Cola, like Warren Buffett or whatever. The thing is, those things are unhealthy. I bought today, as everybody knows, I treat myself with ice cream. So, in the freezer behind me, I bought myself some Cornetta ice cream bars.
there you go.
But I'm only gonna have one tonight, and well, maybe I'll have two, but depends how I'm feeling. But
Yeah.
I think about it like this: I'm not. I was gonna say smoking Cornettas, like
You're not
12 a
like
night or something.
chain eating cornettas.
Exactly. And I think that's the thing with like cigarettes and tobacco. But you know what? I also think it's interesting. So I know I said it the other week, and I'm like reluctant to say what I'm about to say, but screw it. I'm going to say it. I went on my date last week, and she's very European. This girl is very European. But she like casually, just pulled out her cigarette and was like, "Do you mind?" And I was like, "No, I don't mind." What am I going to say? Like, no way, But I gotta say, man, it wasn't. It was a turnoff. It was a turnoff, and that's what I'll say about that. Like I think people, first of all, smoke not necessarily because it's like, I think we all know it's not healthy. That's the given. But I think we're doing it for all the wrong reasons. I think we're doing it out of either, anxiety or nerves, or, we're bored. We're bored. I've been literally, I was speaking earlier this week somewhere with a lot of, addicts and depressives, and, it's like vaping. It's like you can't hold off for like a freaking hour, like just relax. And I think, I don't know, we're running, like, this is where these companies are making their big bucks, and they can play off of that. And I don't even know addiction wise. It's like, I think it's like this boredom thing as well. But ultimately, long term, I think the industry, and I have zero stats on this. If somebody can correct me, by all means, in the comments.
Yeah, we're just thinking
I
out
think the
loud.
industry in the long term is just dying over time, as we hopefully, or at least I want it to be, as I hope that we're all getting smarter and treating ourselves healthier.
Yeah. I don't know. I like you said, I have no stats around that. I don't know overall if there's a net like drop off in tobacco and nicotine users, or if I mean there probably is, right? Like when we see cigarette volumes declining, some of those people have to be quitting altogether. But I would imagine that the great majority of them are just getting their fix from other sources.
I was going to
Um,
say they're probably switching
hmm
to
And
some
that's
other addictive product.
yeah, and that's what companies like Altria are relying on, and it makes sense. Like give them an alternative. Um, but yeah, it's just kind of like I was saying earlier in the conversation. It just seems like for them particularly there are so many roadblocks that they're being met with, and other companies are having more success. Like Philip Morris, I think, is having more success, much more success in this realm so far, and I think British American Tobacco is as well more success in this realm by a long shot than Altria is. Um, and so other companies are just really have a big advantage right now. And so all that's to say, just kind of closing the book on this. Now, when the share price is up so much in the last year, I don't think is a bad time to lock in some gains and go elsewhere. And you know what? If I feel like I made the wrong decision, and at some point in the future, Altria goes back down in share price, which I think gets a little bit frothy right now, so that's not out of the realm of possibility. But if that ends up being the case, I can always jump back in. That's the good thing about stocks is you can, you have that liquidity. So that's kind of where I'm at.
What was Altria's dividend yield? And I'm not a shareholder, so I don't follow, keep up the tabs with it. But what was the dividend yield with Altria, and what are you now willing to invest into that has either the similar, not similar dividend yield, I guess more of a the fine medium between a growth and a higher yielder? Like what is that range for you?
Yeah, so I'm looking at my spreadsheet right now. Altria's yield is right at about 7%. So pretty decent yielder, but I would be okay like if on a net basis, if I reinvested the proceeds from Altria across the rest of my portfolio, if on a net basis, I'm reinvesting at like a 4% yield, which is totally doable based on the few tickers that I mentioned earlier, Zoetis, Chevron. Chevron's is at almost 5%. Zoetis is like 1%, so very low. Johnson and Johnson's 3.4%. What was the other one? Oh, Blue Owl, 10%. So I think it's I'm looking around my portfolio. Even like Vici Properties and Realty Income, I could throw some more into there as well. But there's options. And so I think if I, settled at around a 4% reinvestment yield, then that's solid. I'll miss out on maybe 50 or 60 bucks of income. So it's not a big deal.
Ryan, do stocks like any of the Mag Sevens get you at all like excited or interested at all? Like you're gonna have this lump sum of capital now,
Yeah.
and just kind of looking at where everything is. I mean, the last couple of weeks to months, there was great opportunities with the Mag 7. And to be honest with you, from where I stand and everything I'm looking into, quantum computing is a and it's a very early stages, as much as we can believe it right now. Quantum really is still at this growth stage. Do any opportunities out there in that realm that do pay a dividend, though under 1%, grab your attention?
Yes. So funny enough, I was actually thinking about Google. In thinking about all of this Altria
Oh,
stuff, I was thinking about Google. And I don't think I shared this earlier. I don't think I shared this earlier. No, I definitely didn't. You asked me like what initially sparked this thought. And I read this, I wish I had it in front of me, and I wish I have the link to it actually. Bear with me as I pull this up. But I recently stumbled across this almost like a research paper. Let me pull it up and see. Yeah, and Ari, I'll send you the link to it in WhatsApp because I think you'd enjoy reading it too. But this research paper is called Complexity Investing by two guys, Brinton Johns and Brad Slingerland. I hadn't heard of them before. They wrote this thing about 10 years ago, back in 2014. But essentially, the gist of this paper, it's about 40 pages long, 45 pages. I think you'll really like it. But at the root of it, the gist of it, they're talking about moving forward, like what makes for a good investment, what makes for a high quality investment. And they boiled it down to two things. A business should have one of these two things, at least, ideally both of these two things. And the first of which is resilience. The business should be resilient to where it has these protective competitive advantages that allow it to be dominant in its space. So it should, number one, be resilient. But number two, and I mentioned this word a couple of times throughout this conversation, this business should also have optionality. And that is the ability to be agile, the ability to pivot when necessary, the ability to reinvent itself with a clear path to reinvent itself. And anyway, you get the gist of it. So this business should have resilience and optionality. And that's really what made me think about Altria Group. Historically, it's been a resilient business. I think that resiliency is declining. And I'm seeing that play out quarter to quarter to quarter. They still have optionality, but the decisions they're making in that realm have not been great so far. That's really where they're meeting these roadblocks. And so that's really what sparked this whole thing. Now, with that, I was also thinking about Google. This was one of the companies they actually talked about a little bit, not too much, in this paper. But it made me think, like, yeah, I can see that. Google is resilient for obvious reasons. They are, by and large, the dominant search engine. They've got all these different revenue sources coming in, not just, and they're dominant in all of them, not just search, but cloud, AI now, soon probably quantum computing. They've got all these other things, self-driving, and that makes them resilient on one hand, but that also like speaks to their optionality. Like they've been able to take all of this cash, and none of this is going to be surprising to you guys who've spent 5 minutes thinking about Google, but anyway, this speaks to their optionality. They're just, oh gosh, they are a river of cash, a never-ending river of cash, and they are putting it to work, throwing things at the wall and seeing what sticks, trying all these different things and adding new layers to their business. And so, yeah, I was thinking about Google as it applies to these same qualities that I'm seeing diminish in Altria. I'm seeing and reading about being present in Google. And I also knew, like I knew these things as it pertained to Google, but the way that they explained it made me think about it a little bit harder. Does that mean I'm going to add Google to the portfolio?
No,
I don't
not
know.
at all.
I don't know. Maybe.
You just went on, a few minutes to a handful of minutes worth of this powerful Google rant. You're like, does it mean I'm going to add it? No.
Yeah. I don't know. Maybe.
I have a question for you. I'm actually really curious about your opinion, and I'm curious to get everyone else's opinion on this matter as well. And it does pertain to Google. So OpenAI is kind of, when it comes to search and AI search and all that, like the direct competitor here. And everyone keeps saying that OpenAI is the next big thing to take Google down. And we all know how, like, we get our chat GPT search now, where it's just like you type your question, you get your answer. And therefore it kind of makes Google's search a little bit more irrelevant, because you don't need to search now for things. Like, you can just get your direct answer. Apple now just partnered up with OpenAI, which is pretty cool. I actually think that's a really amazing partnership. But I'm not freaking out and saying like Google's going to disappear, because I've seen a lot of people over the last week or so freak out with some of this news with OpenAI. But I'm just curious to know, like, what you think about Google's future in regards to OpenAI, and everybody else's opinion down in the comments about that same matter. I foresee personally Google continuing to be a dominant leader, and as you said, plenty of optionality, which is something that OpenAI does not have right now. And then we have Alphabet that has, of course, not just Google under its wing there, but YouTube, the second largest search engine in the world. And so just with those two options alone, it's a powerhouse. Now add in everything else. But then I'm thinking, well, Google can easily pivot and make, a search very similar to OpenAI. But I don't know. What do you think? How do you feel about like OpenAI and that type of search versus Google's?
That's a good question.
Like for me, it's hard to see where OpenAI is just going to whack Google and take its place. I don't see it.
I mean, OpenAI's LLM language learning model it does the same thing as Gemini, right? Like they're very much the same product or the same idea, and so people will use one or the other. There's probably room for both, and we'll see and have seen others like it. I think Claude is another one. Doesn't X have their own LLM now? So we're seeing these things. We're seeing more and more of these things pop up. And there's plenty of pie to go around for all of these players involved. But to your point, like where Google has the advantage is they have that resilience in these other revenue streams, where OpenAI, at least so far, just has ChatGPT and DALL-E or whatever it is, the video image version of ChatGPT, where they just have those couple of things. Google has all of that, plus still Google search, plus still YouTube, plus self-driving, plus cloud, plus quantum computing, plus robotics, which is a whole nother realm, like that's going to be crazy too. So they just have all of these, and plus healthcare. So they just have all of these other things going on that OpenAI doesn't have. Both seem to have optionality. Google or Alphabet seems to have more resilience and probably more optionality because they're probably generating much more cash than OpenAI. So
it's just one of those things I think about because again, and these are such different players than I personally feel, and it's said so many times, right? Like 30 years, 40 years, 50 years ago, the top performing stocks are almost, well, they're no longer these days, right? Take like a Kodak. But I kind of look at the Mag 7 today as very different players than those stocks that have disappeared. And I don't necessarily foresee them disappearing like the Kodaks of the world because it's so like they're intangible products for the most part with well, that's not true. But what they're doing and what they're focused on is innovation rather than, the good old tangible Kodak camera that failed to innovate.
Yeah.
And I just think
go
they're
ahead, I'm
different.
sorry.
No, I just think they're different types of opportunities or stocks that are out there for us now that will be along for the long haul.
I agree. And everything moving forward, any new development technologically is going to take a huge amount of research and development, and it's going to take a huge amount of time to come to fruition. Some of these things that are just now, that we're like just now getting around to or hearing more about, robotics, language learning models, you name it, self-driving cars, these things have been in the works for, we don't even know how long. It could be over a decade or decades at this point. And it takes just an insane amount of cash to be able to actually bring these things front and center, and actually bring them to market and improve on them from there. And so that's one of the things that I think speaks to, once again, just the resilience of some of these Mag 7 companies, whether it's Meta or Google, is they have the cash to put towards research and development, which allows them to, get one step ahead of other companies that may not have the resources to enter into these technological spaces. That the barrier to entry is the cash, and Google has it. Well, a lot of these Mag 7 companies just have it coming out of their ears.
I agree. I'm curious. Look, everybody, I'm curious to know your thoughts on this matter too. So drop us a comment down there in the comments. And I wanted to ask you this question as well tonight, which I think is a pretty epic question based on who I'm about to mention. But it came in from the Blossom community. So once again, Blossom, shout out to the entire Blossom community and everyone who's connected with Ryan and I on Blossom. Links are down there in the description, pinned comment as well for you.
All you bloomers out there.
Get to it. But this one came in from So Bait Kryptonite. Anyways, it's saying my 7 and 4-year-olds are invested in the market. Mention 3 dividend stock funds. And the real question here is, should I consider replacing a dividend growth, SCHD, a more stable dividend fund, with more of a dividend growth ETF or just a growth ETF? Now, these kids are 7 and 4 invested into like an SCHD. I feel like everybody knows my stance.
I agree with you. I think I know your stance too. And yeah, this is probably not one of the few, but I mean, they're not going to be even thinking about their portfolios for a long, long time. And I don't know, it could be fine just sitting in SCHD, but the reason that I think no, I'm not even gonna get into that. I think, Ari, if I have you down, you're saying just put it in the S&P 500. You're better off in the S&P 500 or VGT or something that will generate more growth. That's where your head is at, right?
Yeah, I mean, my head is, what are you doing? I mean, you're playing so safe with an account, for your kids. It's 7 and 4 years old. This is the exact time where you should be like VGTing it, or even just the S&P.
Yeah,
but they're by no means like dividends, really.
I actually agree with that. The reason being, I would think that for them, you want the biggest market value that you can give them by the time they are ready to take those investments into their own hands. And who knows, like, it could be SCHD. Like, we'll see what this next decade looks like. It could be SCHD, but chances are you're probably going to see a higher total portfolio value putting it in just even just the S&P 500 or so. And it's just more simple and straightforward. The 500 largest companies, and no matter what happens, those will be the 500 largest companies. The ones that suck, get taken out. You're only dealing with the winners. So, yeah, good place to put your kids' money.
I'm always saying, if you're not looking to actually retire earlier and live off your dividends, then you probably have no business in a SCHD type of fund for decades. To me, it doesn't make sense. And I always go back to this. I was so naive to investing when I first really started off on this journey. And again, there's like this I want to say there's the start of my investment journey, which was like me just putting a lump sum into VTI and then not touching it for a couple of years. But the real start of the journey, which is why I say it's kind of twofold, was when I actively started to invest and like learn about investing in stocks. And all that hype came from Andre Jick and seeing that portfolio and dividend income. And like, yeah, I always saw people, saying, well, dividends don't really matter that much because, at the end of the day, the value of the stock dicks down, but what it did provide me with was safety and security to get my head in the game and feel comfortable investing and kind of get that down pat. But just knowing what I know now today, oh man, I wish I had my strategy today, 5 years ago, 10 years ago. I don't even know where I'd be. I think I'd be over $500,000.
Really?
It's a bold
if you would have,
statement, but
yeah, potentially. Yeah.
Dude, my
Like if you would have just put it
portfolio,
in like VGT or something.
yeah. I mean, there's a couple guys, fellow YouTubers who are out there who are just VOO in VGT, and their returns are just insane, and it's so simple. I got to be honest, just investing into ETFs and not even investing in individual stocks has become such a sexy idea, Ryan. Like, you don't even, at that point, you literally don't need to think about anything. You just put money in every week or every month, whenever you can, and that's it. There's no
Hmm.
stress.
So you're enjoying the simplicity and the hands-off aspect to it more than you enjoyed. Well, that's not to say you can't do stock research and stuff, but like it's good to know that you don't have to if you don't want to.
Well, what I realized, when I started to really clean up my portfolio, at one point I think I had three or four ETFs or funds in there. And what I realized was I first of all, simplification is so important. Simplify the portfolio, clean it up. Two ETFs now remain in my portfolio. And now they're huge positions. I mean, over 30% with both of them, if I'm not mistaken. And if not, then just around 30%. But it's just made it so easy, and like I just get to focus in other areas of my life, which I really appreciate. Now I do still have a deep appreciation for stock picking, which is why I'll never fully be 100% just in funds. But I really am here to say that, definitely for the 4-year olds and 7-year olds, like, S&P 500 at minimum, or some crazy growth ETF in technology, because we're only technologically advancing. But at this point, I'd be comfortable to say that, to have 3 to 5 individual stocks in my portfolio and then really double down on just 2 ETFs would work for me as well, because I love all this time that I have on my hands to just build other things and do other things and still crush it in the market.
Yeah, that's totally understandable, man. And I think that like in saying all of that, it calls into question or begs the question rather. Okay, like because I don't necessarily disagree with you, especially as it pertains to like the 7-year-old and 4-year-old. But it begs the question. Okay, well then, Ryan, like why? If you agree with that, why don't you just do the same thing? And I think the best answer I have for that is I still want the optionality to be able to use my dividends if I want them. I don't plan on using my dividends, but it's also nice to know that like at this point I'm bringing in almost $300 a month. Like if I want to start using some of them, if I get in a pinch, that money is there, and I'm at a different stage in my life than the 7-year-old and the 4-year-old, and so like they're not even gonna realize they even have those portfolios probably for another well, probably for another decade or at least, and they because of that they won't see any of the swings in the market too. And as someone who deals with this stuff every day, I certainly will and don't want that, and or want to minimize that. And also like having this cash based relationship with the businesses that I own helps with that as well. And just kind of going back to the two buzzwords of this conversation, resilience and optionality, I think that still investing the way that I do gives me both of those things. It gives me a bit more resilience because I have this all weather approach, and also like the optionality to allocate cash other places if I want to. Does that make sense?
Yeah, of course. I just, and again, I'm never going to get rid of the individual stocks because I like stock picking. I just don't want to be so meshed in balance sheets and financial statements and, kind of divvying up all my time
Yeah.
there when I could be building my own businesses, and doing my own thing. And that's where I have, a joy as well. And that's where the ETF positions, as long as you're heavily invested in the S&P, you're never really going to lose. And then anything you do after that, if that foundation is built so strong, I feel like you're just set up to do kind of whatever you want. I conducted a Masters of the Market chat the other night, and I had on this guy, Gary Gill, who is the CEO of this company called Thrive. It has nothing to do with investing. Well, he kind of does. He helps, companies in the financial space with advertising. And then that's where he kind of grew his affinity and love for investing after learning so much from the industry. And he has a 3-fund portfolio, and everything's really, automated for him. And he's just like, we got along so well because of his mindset and my mindset. And it was just like, don't do stupid things. Don't waste your money on stupid things. And just really, the one thing CEOs do really good at is they're robotic to things that they need to be robotic with. And I mean that in the sense of they're emotionless with a lot of things. They're very consistent. So we were talking, I honestly want to go as far as saying the second half of the interview was, I think, one of the best interviews I've ever had of Masters of the Market, purely for his mindset. And I like the notion of like just keeping it simple, streamline the process so you ultimately get your time back, which is why we're investing in the first place, to get our time back. And I just think that having, these big foundational funds in your portfolio, maybe 2 to 3 stocks if you feel comfortable or, solid enough to invest into individual stocks is the way to go. And that's what I've turned my portfolio into, and tremendous success with it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think the less number of holdings you have, the deeper you can go with each holding. And that's what gives you the best of both worlds, I think. You've got the diversification from the ETFs, but still you can have the fun of thinking about these individual companies by having those individual positions. But just having a couple of them allows you to go really, really deep with them. So you get to scratch that itch without feeling like you need to, you've got chicken pox or something like that.
Yeah. Well, look, also, his whole thing was like, just keep it boring. And it's so true, man. We made it really simple the other night, and just saying that if your individual stock picks are not beating the S&P 500, then you're totally wasting your time. And you got to backtrack it. Have your positions been outbeating the S&P for the last few years? And what are your projections, at least in the next 2 to 3 years? Like, are these companies going to outbeat the S&P? Because if they're not outbeating or will outbeat the S&P, and you're just there to either collect a dividend on it or you're interested in the company, well, there might be better, returns for your investments. And not only that, but you'll get your time back with the S&P. And that's my sentiment as well, right? It's like there's not a lot of stocks out there that are going to consistently beat the S&P. So be careful.
Yeah. And that begs the question, okay, well, so how do you know if your stocks are going to beat the S&P? How do you know if they have the capacity to do so? Now, on one hand, it's easy enough to say, I don't know, because I don't know what the future is going to hold. Anything could happen. The S&P could explode. It could plummet. Every day, is a mystery on the stock market. So really anything could happen. I don't know. I can't predict the future. And that's true. But at the same time, this is where I think it pays to study some of the greats like the Warrens and the Charlies of the world. And Charlie said something, maybe it was Warren, one of the two. They both probably said it, but their whole thing was a business from a long-term perspective will only generate returns at the same rate as the business is actually growing. And so that's when that's when you look at things like earnings per share growth, free cash flow per share growth, and look at how the management team is deploying that capital. If they're able to put it to work at high rates of return, then over an extended period of time, the share price and the returns that you get should follow the same returns that they are reinvesting the capital back into the business. That's when it, as far as like the time it takes to research companies or whatever, that's what can make it so simple, is just, having that one overarching metric that can tell you a lot about the returns you might be able to expect. It's that return on invested capital, which is what they were getting to, Warren and Charlie. It's like, just look at the return on invested capital. Actually, they talk a lot about this in the book, What I Learned About Investing from Darwin too. Same exact idea. Just look at that one metric, that return on invested capital. And if it looks like if a company's generating high returns, number one, that's fantastic. Number two, if you can see a clear path to where they can continue generating those returns, then that's what you should be looking for. And that's like the sign of a high quality business. And those are the kind that you should invest in, because over a long period of time, the thing about these high quality businesses is that time tends to really, like, no matter what price you buy them at, that's a whole different conversation. But time is like the friend of these high quality businesses. They just get better and better with time, and your returns will follow suit. And on the other hand, low quality businesses that are, not growing and not generating high returns on capital, those time is like the enemy of those businesses, because they just get worse with time. So it all comes out in the end. It all comes out with time, but you just have to look at the ones that are efficiently using their capital and just buy those, hold on to them, and time should take care of itself. And so when it comes to like simplifying the investment process, or not wanting to spend, a lot of time digging into the numbers, that's a pretty good place to start and simplify it to the return on invested capital. Is the business growing? Is the debt manageable? And is the dividend safe? Just start by looking at those few things. That's kind of how I approach it, at least.
Now, I also want to say, if anything that Ryne just shared doesn't sound fun or exciting to you or of interest to you, that's another sign, I feel, that it's just like, just keep it all simple. Go with funds. And I want to have everybody throw this in the comments too, because I think it's also very interesting to see. And hopefully next week, Ryne and I will have a guest on the deep end with us. So very exciting, because he's very entrenched in the ETF world. But we are at an interesting point where the amount of ETFs are about to surpass the amount of the amount of stocks out there that we can invest into, which is creating a whole new dynamic, a whole new world of an investment world for us, and a different investing landscape. So I'd be curious to know where everybody else sits out there. Are you guys more individual stock heavy in your portfolios? Are you more ETF heavy in your portfolios? How do you feel about going one route or the other, or is it more about the balance? Because, as for me, over the past decade, I have, went from just the just the VTI to then, loading up on dividend stocks and then cutting back down. And it's been a wild adventure, but I've certainly changed and evolved as an investor to where I feel so comfortable now with my strategy and saying that I'm very heavy in 2 ETFs, and then I have I have my hand-selected handful of individual stocks that really are like my go-to die and buy, maybe buy and die. I'm sorry. I don't know why I die first, but, like, geez, I'm tired, man. But, those are the picks for me that they're going to the grave with me, essentially,
Yeah, that's a good feeling. It's a good feeling to know that you have those that you're locked in with, and to know that, like, you've got that punch card, right, that Warren Buffett talks about. You've got the punch card with however many holdings, 20 or whatever. It's really good to know that, you've got a couple of those punched. It's kind of good to know that I don't have many of these punches left. I've got maybe a few punches left, so I better use them wisely. It's kind it's good to know that you've got probably almost like peaceful to know that you've got a couple of those punches taken care of.
Yeah, for sure. And you know what? Some of the time, some videos that I make, I say like my all-in dividend stocks.
Hmm.
And some people get mad because like, well, last week you were all in on like these other ones, I was like, well, no, I
Yeah.
really only go all in on like basically the same 5 to 7 stocks I talk about during those types of videos. And the reason why they're all in for me, although I'm not all in on them, is because, well, one, to be all in on just any one individual stock, I think would be pretty naive. But at least divvy it up between a handful. And these are the handful. These are like the ones that if someone had like a gun to my head and I really had to pick just one stock, well, I know I'd narrow it all down to just these five. And then out of those five, I'd really, really start to do some, nitpicking in the balance sheets and the income statements and the financials and look at the trajectories where these companies might be going. But I think it's worth it really to start really looking at your portfolio and your positions and asking yourself some deeper questions about how you're investing. Are you outperforming the S&P with your stocks? Do you think your stocks will outperform the S&P? Do you have a love and excitement for investing? And we kind of always jump back to this point, but it's the most, I think, fundamental piece to investing is, do you
Yeah.
enjoy the process?
Hmm. I agree, man. Before we wrap it up, I have one more question for you, kind of along all of these lines. Do you think your portfolio will ever be complete? Do you think a portfolio can ever be complete to where you've got all the pieces in place, all of the holes are punched. You won't add any more companies, you won't subtract any more companies. Do you think an investor can ever reach that point where no other additions or subtractions are necessary?
I do. You know what? I think it all really comes down to self-awareness. Being very aware of who you are, what you're doing, where you're going. Because for me, over the years, again, I went from like 40 positions to under 10. And I just find that people who have a lot of positions, I'm not talking about the portfolios with like 20 stocks, 25 stocks, because that's usually what the golden rule of thumb is that we often read, right? Like 20 to
Yeah.
25 is the magic number. I'm talking about people who have like 40, 50, 90 holdings. It's like that's a little much. And I feel like those people, they don't ever really take the time to sit with themselves, ask deep questions, and realize that either A, you could just go with an ETF in the first place that will probably do more, produce more for you than you picking these stocks. But I feel like it's kind of like investors ADHD. It's like, oh, I need that one. Oh, I want that one. It's like you just focus. And in that focus, you will find that your returns. I can't stress it enough. Since my strategy has changed, and it's right there on my channel, everybody can go see it. I've had a few comments in my last video come in about a portfolio update, which I kind of stopped doing, but some people requested it. So I'm going to make a portfolio update. For those people who have been following my channel and my journey, though, you can see it. Like when I started to pivot and when I started to clean up the portfolio and then myopically focus on like my core 7. Now it's like the 5. My portfolio has literally surged and it makes it really exciting. Now, when a United Health goes down, that's not so fun. It's like you're kind of mad at yourself, but I could have never seen all that was coming, like there's no way I could have foreseen that. So now I'm just sitting with the fact that I still have high conviction in the company, and it's just going to take time, and that's okay. But again, in this time, I do get antsy because I'm like looking at other stocks. I'm like, oh, well, look at that one's up, and I'm like, yeah, but this was your pick because X, Y, and Z, and you still hold by your conviction, and so it's a waiting game. That's where I stand. I'll just before I know we said we were closing out, but just for you to answer that question, what do you think?
I'm more no than yes. I like the idea of reaching that like portfolio nirvana where everything's perfectly in place as it should be. But and I feel this for myself too, as time goes on and I spend more time doing this, there are less and less companies that I like want to add because I feel like I've got a lot of great ones already. Um, but I still think this world changes so much and we still have so much life left to live that at one point in my life I could think that I'm at that like nirvana stage where the portfolio is perfect. I don't need to make any more tweaks to it. But then like there could be like advances in technology or some new business that comes along that seems great. And also I could just as I learn more about the world and different industries and different businesses, that might open me up to want to invest in other companies too. So I think that ultimately at the end of the day, because this is an infinite game and because we are learning more as we go along and as there becomes as new businesses get invented and come to the market, I think that there's always going to be ones that we are intrigued by, always new ones that we'll be intrigued by over time. And of those new ones that that come into existence, maybe one of those you'll want to add to your portfolio. It's possible at least. So I guess it could be possible, but realistically, and I think you touched on it pretty well. You called it like investor ADHD. I don't think we'll ever be able to shake that. I think that's just part of our human nature, and so I think there's always going to be some tinkering that we'll end up doing for better or for worse.
It's like the Dory from Finding Nemo. Look at that stock. Look at that stock.
Yeah, very much so. And now like you were saying, all these ETFs. Now it's look at this ETF, look at that ETF.
Yeah.
So it's
This
just
one's
yeah.
leveraged. That one's covered call. It's crazy. I think it's getting more complex out there by the day, which again makes it just important to keep it simple. But investors, this is another opportunity for you now to jump down there in the comments and let us know some of the answers that you got for Ryan and I. Is an investor's nirvana possible? Is that achievable? Is that a thing? Let us know down there in the comments. If you're not already subscribed to the Deep End, we're going to ask you to go ahead and subscribe now. This community is growing. It's incredibly exciting. And then most importantly here, Ryan and I have our portfolios on Blossom in full display. You will be able to see firsthand right when Ryan does it, selling out of Altria Group or me having added waste management, if and only if you join us on Blossom as well. But with all of that, investors, until next week, we will catch you in the next episode of The Deep End.